So let us have the recording and the live streaming. We're going to begin our beginner's Hebrew language. We're going to begin our beginner's Hebrew language, year 2, by going to God in prayer. Father in heaven, we give you thanks for this time that we have to study the Hebrew language. We pray that you may give us the ability to understand new grammatical ideas and to be able to use this knowledge to understand the teachings of the Holy Scriptures better. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, on the screen you have your test. Can you see it? Are you able? Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any questions on your test?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. We're moving on then to the new lesson, which I will bring on the screen at this time. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Beginner's Hebrew language.
Good. So we're starting lesson number 14 in the beginner's Hebrew language. This is supposed to be year 2, not year 1. The title of the lesson is Dagesh Lene. The general objectives are 1, to examine the meaning of Dagesh Lene. 2, to examine what part of a letter Dagesh Lene may be found in. 3, to examine what effect Dagesh Lene has on a letter. 4, to examine which letters may take a Dagesh Lene. 5, to examine when a letter may get a Dagesh Lene. And 6, to examine when a letter may not get a Dagesh Lene. The specific objectives are 1, at the end of this lesson, the students will have explained the meaning of 2 Hebrew words, Dagesh and Lene. 2, at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified what part of a letter Dagesh Lene may be found in. 3, at the end of this lesson, the students will have orally expressed what effect Dagesh Lene has on the pronunciation of a letter. 4, at the end of this lesson, the students will have identified 6 letters which may take Dagesh Lene. 5, at the end of this lesson, the students will have explained when one of these 6 letters may take Dagesh Lene. 6, at the end of this lesson, the students will have explained when one of these 6 letters may not take Dagesh Lene. We first look at the definition or meaning of Dagesh and Lene. Dagesh means piercing. Dagesh is a dot in the heart of a consonant, which looks as if there is a hole that has been produced by piercing or sticking something through it. Hence it is called piercing. So this piercing is represented by a dot. And this dot is put in the heart, that is in the center or in the middle of a consonant. The other word is Lene. Lene means weak. So Dagesh Lene means a weak piercing, represented by a dot. Now let us look at the effect of dagesh lene on a letter. To put it in another way, what dagesh lene does to the pronunciation of a letter, for it does affect the kind of sound that is made by the letter that it is in. Dagesh lene hardens the sound of a consonant so that it changes the pronunciation of the consonant. For example, the consonant V, without the dot in the heart or the middle of it, is to be pronounced as V or V, such as in van. So the sound of this is V as in van. But when it has the dot in the heart or the middle of it, such as we see here, it is called Baith, and it is to be pronounced B, such as the B in bathroom, B. Another example is the consonant Fe. Without the dot in the heart or the middle of it, it is pronounced as PH, such as in telephone, or as the F in fan. But when it has the dot in the heart or the middle of it, as we see here, it is called Pay, and it is to be pronounced as P or P, such as in path. So the effect of dagesh lene on a letter is to change the pronunciation or the sound of that letter. It gives it a hard sound in contrast to a soft sound. Now, here are the consonants which may take dagesh lene: Vaith, Rimel, Thalith, Kaf, Fe, Thao. These are the 6 consonants. And in Hebrew grammars, the different writers of the grammars teach that you may remember these 6 letters by turning them into 2 words, by saying Begath, Kefath, Begath, Kefath. And when you hear Begath, you think of these 6 letters, Begath, Kefath, or more accurately, I should say, Verath, Kefath. So these are the 6 consonants that we may take dagesh lene in the middle of each of them. Dagesh lene may be found in the heart or the middle of any of the consonants above, when any of these consonants starts a syllable in the beginning or middle of a word, providing that there is no vowel immediately before that consonant. So if Vaith comes at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word and it starts a syllable, then it does have the qualification or the condition necessary to receive a dot in the middle of it. So it has to start a syllable, whether that syllable is in the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word. But there is another condition. This can only apply if there is no vowel immediately before any of these consonants. If there is a vowel before it, then it cannot take dagesh lene in it. So 2 conditions to have a dot in the middle of these consonants. Condition number 1, it must start a syllable, whether the syllable is in the beginning of a word or the syllable is started in the middle of a word. That is one condition that will make it ready to receive a dagesh lene. The second condition is there must be no vowel immediately before that particular letter. So if these two conditions are present, then any of these letters can take Dagesh Lene in the middle or heart of them. Now let us look at examples of this. Examples of when to use Dagesh Lene. So we look at the verb batak, which means he trusted. And notice that the Baith is here. It begins a syllable. The first syllable is ba. It begins a syllable. And so it can take a Dagesh Lene. Dagesh Lene is in Baith because it starts a syllable. Notice also below, there is yivtak. Now this is the same verb, but it is in the imperfect tense here. This is in the perfect tense, this is in the imperfect tense, and it's pronounced yivtak. Why is it that this particular letter, which is one of the 6 letters that can take Dagesh Lene, doesn't have it? It is because even though it is in the first syllable, it does not start the syllable. What starts the syllable is this consonant yod. And this really comes at the end of the syllable. It does not start the syllable. It does not start the syllable like in ba. It ends the syllable of yiv. So and another thing is, there is a vowel that comes before the letter. The vowel short hirik. And the vowel also causes Vaith not to have Dagesh Lene. Let's move over here. Yivtak means he will trust. We will look at Yikbor. Now notice that in Yikbor, meaning he will bury, that there is a Dagesh Lene in this consonant. And it is so because Baith is the beginning of this syllable. The syllable consists of Baith, Holem, and Resh. This is the second syllable. This is the last syllable of the verb. And it starts a syllable in the middle of a word. So it takes the Dagesh Lene, Yikbor. So notice that Baith starts a syllable and takes Dagesh Lene. However, another form of the same verb in the perfect tense is kavar, which means he buried. Notice that there is a vowel right before the Vaith. And because there is a vowel immediately before the Vaith, it cannot take Dagesh Lene. Dagesh Lene does not go in there. You see, the two conditions are not met. The two conditions for a consonant to take Dagesh Lene are, 1, it must begin a syllable, either in the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word. Condition number 2, there must not be any vowel before it. And if there is, the Dagesh Lene is not going to be in there. So Vaith does not have Dagesh Lene because a vowel, kamis, is before it. Let me go over that another time. So here we have 2 verbs. One verb is batak, which means he trusted. Another verb is yiftak, which means he will trust. Now in batak, we see that it has a Dagesh Lene. But in Yivtak, we see that the same consonant does not have Dagesh Lene in it. And the reasons are, number one, in Batak, the Beth begins the syllable at the beginning of the word. However, in this one, Yivtak, it does not begin the syllable. Number two, there is no vowel before the Beth in Batak. But in Yivtak, the vowel Hirik, short Hirik, is immediately before the Beth, and therefore it cannot take Dagesh Lene. In this example, he will bury and he buried. In Yikbor, we see that there is a Dagesh Lene. Why? Because it starts a syllable in the middle of a word, and there is no vowel before it. The simple Shawa that we learned about in our first lesson in January is not a vowel. And it is because Kof has no vowel that you put the simple Shawa underneath it. So this is not a vowel. And so the vowel is not here, and therefore Dagesh Lene can go in this consonant. However, in this case, we find that the same consonant doesn't have a Dagesh Lene, but there is a vowel right before it, immediately before it. So these are the two conditions that I'm talking about. Dagesh Lene may be found in the heart or the middle of any of the consonants above when any one of these consonants starts a syllable in the beginning or middle of a word, providing that there is no vowel immediately before that consonant. So these examples were to illustrate that rule. Here is Beth, it begins a syllable at the beginning of a word. Here is Beth, it begins a syllable in the middle of a word, and so it can take Dagesh Lene. On the other hand, here is Beth, and there is a vowel before it, and it doesn't have Dagesh Lene. And here is Beth again, and it doesn't have Dagesh Lene, but there is a vowel before it. So it must start a syllable at the beginning of a word or the middle of a word, and it must not have any vowel before it in order for it to take Dagesh Lene. Do you have any question on that?
The Dagesh Lene, it can go on the consonant that begins the word and in the middle, but it cannot go on the consonant that ends the word.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So it must start a syllable.
Or in the middle.
In the beginning of a word, like Batak, this starts a syllable. This is the first letter in the word. This is B. This is the very first letter in the word, and B and A is the first syllable in the word Batak. So it starts a syllable, and this syllable is in the beginning of a word. Here again, you have Yik Bor, and you have Bor. This is the beginning of the last syllable. This is the beginning of the last syllable. And so because it's the beginning of a syllable in the middle of a word, or this is the beginning of a syllable at the start of a word, it can take Dagesh Lene. And if there is a vowel that is before the letter that can take a Dagesh Lene, it will not take Dagesh Lene. So it must start a syllable in the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word, and it must not have a vowel before it, otherwise it won't take Dagesh Lene in the middle of it.
Repeat that sentence, sir.
Okay. There are two conditions in which Dagesh Lene can be put in this consonant, Beth. It must start a syllable, either at the beginning of a word, like batak. BA is the first syllable, and B is the first letter in the word, and this therefore is starting the syllable at the beginning of a word. It must also start a syllable in the middle of a word in order for it to have dagesh lene. And here is the syllable that is in this word, B-O-R, and Beth starts that last syllable of this verb. If it begins a syllable at the start of a word, or if it begins a syllable in the middle of a word, then it can take dagesh lene. If there is a vowel that is immediately before Beth or Beth, it won't be able to take dagesh lene. As you can see in this vowel being before Beth and this vowel being before Beth, it does not take dagesh lene when there is a vowel before it.
Okay.
Okay.
Go back, sir. Go back. At the part where say he will bury.
Yes. Yikbor. Yes.
It took dagesh lene, but isn't something before?
Are you referring to these two dots?
Yes, are the one before that, those two dots.
All right. No, it doesn't apply to this one here. You see, what happens is that the vowel must come immediately before this particular consonant in order for it not to take a dagesh lene. But if it is over here at the beginning of a word, it's not going to affect dagesh lene in it. If there was a vowel here, just like it is down there, here is a vowel under, and it causes the Beth not to have a dagesh lene. So the vowel must be immediately before the consonant in order for it not to have a dagesh lene. But if it is over here, it will not affect it.
Okay.
And this is not a vowel. This is a simple schwa, and it is not considered to be a vowel.
Oh, I understand.
Yes. Okay, so let me just go back here. So what we have seen is that there are 6 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet, which may take dagesh lene. This means that no other consonant in the Hebrew alphabet may take dagesh lene. Only these 6, Beth, Rimel, Thaleth, Kaf, Fe, Thau. These are the only 6 consonants that may take dagesh lene. We also have seen that dagesh lene can be placed in any of these consonants if they start a syllable in the beginning of a word or start a syllable in the middle of a word. And also, dagesh lene may be found in these different consonants if there is no vowel immediately before that consonant. Not just that there is no vowel before that consonant, but that there is no vowel immediately before that consonant. And so we have seen it in these examples. You see that Beth starts a syllable in the beginning of the word batak, and it has a dagesh lene. You see also that in this word, yikbor, that this consonant starts a syllable in the middle of this word, and they take dagesh lene. And in the 2 examples at the bottom, you see that there is no dagesh lene in the same consonant because there is a vowel immediately before the consonant. there is a vowel immediately before the consonant, so it does not take Dagesh Lene.
Oh, I understand now fully now, sir.
All right. Okay, let us look at a summary of this. Dagesh means piercing, and it refers to a dot which is in the heart or the middle of a consonant. Lene means weak. The effect of Dagesh Lene is to harden the consonant and to change its pronunciation. Dagesh Lene may only go in 6 consonants: Vaith, Rimel, Thalith, Kaf, Fe, Thao. Dagesh Lene may go in these 6 consonants if any one of them starts a syllable at the beginning or in the middle of a word. Dagesh Lene may not go in any one of these 6 consonants if there is a vowel immediately before it. Now we're going to be watching teaching from YouTube on Dagesh Lene, but we need just to give about a few seconds for this to load. I also have to make sure that the sound is on. Do you see the video loading?
No, sir, I don't see. Only I'm still seeing the summary section of the document. I don't see no video, sir.
All right, I'm gonna go to new share. This is it. Come on. This is it.
Dagesh Lene. Now, the Dagesh Lene is something we've already seen in the lesson
I'm not
letters
seeing.
dot chapter 1. We looked at 6 Hebrew letters.
Can you see anything?
Take this thing called the
I'm
Dagesh Lene.
seeing it now.
We got 6 Hebrew letters that Begad.
All right, hold on. I think I have two of
If
them
you
on at
remember,
the
this is
same
a
time.
mnemonic. To remember the 6
Well,
that
I'm
can take
gonna
a
try
Dagesh
this.
Lene thing called the Dagesh Lene. If they have the Dagesh Lene, they were called they are a stop or a hard sound. If they don't have it, they're a continuous sound. Now, what we didn't cover in that last letters, in that module, was how to tell when the Dagesh Lene is there and when it isn't. Begad, and so that's what I want to do right now. Fat. If you remember, this is a mnemonic. The root is remember the that can take a Dagesh Lene. There are two conditions that if they have the Dagesh Lene,
And
they are
like
to
two
stop.
videos are playing.
Yeah, I know.
One is that it has to be at the beginning of the
Let's have to
syllable.
turn this thing off.
And the second, and both have to be met. So I'm going to put a big and here. And secondly, so first, it must be at the beginning of a syllable, and secondly,
Okay.
it must not follow a vowel. Not follow vowel. So no preceding vowel. Beginning of syllable and no preceding vowel. That's where you'll see a Begad Kafat letter having a Dagesh Lene. Dagesh Lene will be one of these letters if these conditions are met. Let's look at some examples.
It's not working.
Okay, let's look at the word bayit. It's been
Can you see it?
Yes, I'm not seeing. I guess you have to start sharing back.
Okay.
Let us put our syllable division in there. So here we
Not
have
doing.
a
Jesus.
bait, which is a Begad Kafat letter.
All right, let me share the screen again. Let's start from here.
Lene. Now the Dagesh Lene is something we've already seen. Lene. Now the Dagesh Lene is something we've already seen. In the lesson
Can you see it now?
Letters with Dots in chapter 1, we looked at 6 Hebrew letters
Can you see?
that can take
Yes,
this
sir.
thing called Dagesh Lene. And they were called the Begad Kafat letters. Begad Kafat. If you remember, this is a mnemonic to remember the 6 that can take a Dagesh Lene. If they have the Dagesh Lene, they are a stop or a hard sound. If they don't have it, they're a continuous sound. Now, what we didn't cover in that lesson, in that module, was how to tell when the Dagesh Lene is there and when it isn't. And so that's what I want to do right now. The rule is that there are two conditions that need to be met for Dagesh Lene to show up and to stay there. One is that it has to be at the beginning of a syllable. And the second, and both have to be met. So I'm going to put a big and here. And secondly, so first, it must be at the beginning of a syllable, and secondly, it must not follow a vowel. Not follow vowel. So no preceding vowel. Beginning of syllable and no preceding vowel. That's where you'll see a Begad Kafat letter having a Dagesh Lene. Dagesh Lene will be in one of these letters if these conditions are met. Let's look at some examples. Okay, let's look at the word bayit. which means house. So here we have a begad kafat letter, the bait, and it is beginning a word and therefore a syllable, and no preceding vowel. So the dagesh lene is there, and it's pronounced bayit, not vayit. Okay, let's do another one. Do midbar, which I think we already have seen. Means wilderness, midbar. And let us put our syllable division in there. So here we have a bait, which is a begad kafat letter, and it begins a syllable, and there is no preceding vowel. This is the closed consonant, CVC. There's a silent shava here, right? It's not a vowel. It's a syllable marker. Silent shava. So given that this is a silent shava, our conditions are met. This letter is the beginning of a syllable, no preceding vowel. So the dagesh lene is there. Dalet is also a begad kafat letter, so it could take a dagesh lene. Does it meet those two conditions? Is it at the beginning of a syllable? Nope, it's at the end of a syllable. And not only that, it follows a vowel. So on both counts, it's the dagesh lene is eliminated, takes off. Okay, let's look at another word. This is a good word for this because there's lots of begad kafat letters in it. Ko, cha, kochavim. 3 syllables. We'll mark them. Kochavim. So, first, they all start with begad kafat letters. This one, this one, and this one. So kaf, should it have a dagesh lene? Well, we see it does. Why does it? Because it starts a syllable and there's no preceding vowel. No problem. This kaf also starts a syllable, but is there a preceding vowel? Holam vav, very much a vowel. So dagesh lene takes off. No dagesh lene here because of the preceding vowel. Beit, another begad kafat letter, begins a syllable, so that's fine. But there's a preceding vowel, so no dagesh lene. So both conditions have to be met for the dagesh lene to stay there. Now let me give you another one here. Devarim. Devarim is also a word we looked at. De. Va. Rim. We looked at this earlier. This is words. It means words. We'll put our divisions in there too. Devarim. Now, this one is a begad kafat letter. Begins with syllable. No preceding vowel. Therefore, dagesh lene. Meets both conditions. This is also a begad kafat letter. It begins a syllable, so that's fine. And does it have a vowel before it? Well, devarim, in fact, it does. This guy is a vocal shava. In the presence of a vowel, any vowel, even the smallest of vowels, the vocal shava is the most reduced of all vowels. Even that little vowel is enough to scare away the dagesh lene that would otherwise be here. Now, when you look at this word, you have to look careful because you look at this word and there's no dagesh here. You look at this word, which one? Didn't I have one here? Devarim. Yes, here. This one, same thing. You got a bait following a shava. There is a dagesh. Here you have a bait following shava. There is no dagesh. Why is that? It's because this is a silent shava and there's a vocal shava. So when you're thinking about dagesh lenes and whether they should or shouldn't be there, you have to first figure out whether your shava is vocal or not, if you have one there. Because a vocal shava is a vowel, a silent shava is not a vowel. A silent shava is simply a syllable marker. And any vowel will cause dagesh lene to take off. Okay, so dagesh lene is pretty weak, really. Any vowel is going to scare them away. Let's take a look at one other example, one other case. And this is, if you have a word, you can have a word called like ken. Ken means thus or so. Dagesh Leni and a Bagad Kafat letter, no vowel preceding it. But if you precede it with a little metheg there, Vaihi, a separate word. Vaihi means and it was, so and it was so. When you have these two together, then Dagesh Leni disappears. So let's get rid of it. So even in the presence of a vowel that is in the preceding word, Dagesh Leni takes off. So it's not that strong. Now we had an example, a similar example to this, where we had voker here instead. In our Genesis 1 to 5 reading. Let me try and do this here. Okay, we'll copy this down here. And let us put in voker, which is what the word was. Which is it? Voker. And there was a makef here. This is where it says Vaihi Erev, there was evening, Vaihi Voker Yom Echad. There was evening, there was morning, day one. Now this is the same situation here. You have a Begad Kafat letter that could take a Dagesh Leni, begins a syllable, but it follows a vowel. Now here it follows even more closely than here because you have a makef just join the whole thing together. So, but that's why you say Vaihi Voker, not Vaihi Boker. So Dagesh Leni can disappear quite easily. The thing to remember is really just our two conditions. Dagesh Leni will only be there if it's at the beginning of a syllable and does not follow a vowel, any vowel, even a vocal shava.
Okay, so I'm going to be sending you this lesson on Dagesh Leni right after this, and you will study it in preparation for a test on it next week, Friday, March 11th. Do you have any more questions about where to put Dagesh Leni?
And